Ladies and gentlemen, we are under attack. Our very way of life, our very existence is threatened. They have already taken over Washington. They continue to destroy our Constitution. It is time to take back our country now.
The Wise Conservative Show, bringing wisdom back to politics.
Hello. Welcome to the first ever live edition of the Wise Conservative Show. I am your host, Connor Wise. So thank you for tuning in, and hopefully in this episode I will be able to inform you and, let you have a good time in this episode. So in this episode I will be talking about the state of the GOP and really what a brokered convention, which is a high possibility, could mean for the Republican Party. So with that being said, let's jump right into what will actually be happening in my eyes and what is a huge possibility that could be happening to the GOP in this presidential election. So currently in the GOP, in the presidential race, we have 6 candidates in the race. We have Trump, Cruz, Rubio, Carson, Bush, and Kasich. Now, that's a lot of candidates. I am expecting Carson and Kasich to drop out within the next 2 primaries, and so that will drop it down to 4 candidates. Now, if we compare this to previous races, 4 candidates is still quite a bit at this point in the race. Most of the time, the smaller candidates drop out after the first 2, which would be New Hampshire and Iowa. But it seems like these people are going to hold on a little longer than usual. Bush, of course, is going to hold on for as long as he can because he has the most money. He has the biggest super PACs out of every single candidate in the GOP. So, of course, he will be hanging on until the very end. And Rubio, Trump, and Cruz, they are the top 3 that everyone thought would be there for a while. And so I don't see any of those 3 dropping out anytime soon. And quite honestly, I see all 3 of them trying for the nomination until the very end. So what this means is we are still going to have 4 candidates that are in the race until the end of the primaries. So what happens at the end of the primaries is all of these delegates that the candidates have racked up through all of the primaries, they go to a convention and they vote. Some of them are held by, this is all different state to state. Some of them are held to a specific candidate and they are bound to that candidate and they cannot change their choice. But some of them are, in fact, they aren't bound to a candidate and they can choose whatever candidate they want in this convention. So in this convention, you have to have at least you have to have more than 50% of the delegate votes in order to actually get the nomination. So that is a total of 1,237 votes. That's that many delegates. But with these 4 candidates going through this race, there's going to be a small chance of that many delegates being divvied up between, at least one candidate. I don't think we will see one tremendous winner throughout every single state. I think it will go between the 3, if not just Cruz and Trump, for just about every single primary. So this will be a very, I would say, pretty balanced out with the delegates. It wouldn't be perfectly even, but I do think it won't be enough. And, what does that mean? If someone does not have enough votes in order to get that one vote over 50%, what that does mean is, let's just read this rule. This is a rule that the GOP uses in their conventions there to elect the nominee. So this is Rule 40 of these conventions. If, after all of the states and territories have announced their tallies, no candidate has more than 50% of the delegates' votes, the chairman of the convention shall direct the roll of the state to be called again and shall repeat the calling of the roll until a candidate shall have received a majority of the votes entitled to be cast in the convention. So what exactly does this mean? If a candidate does not get over 50% of the votes, they will stay in that convention until someone has enough votes to actually get the nomination. They will keep recalling the roll until enough delegates change their vote to one candidate. So this is exactly what a brokered convention is. Not a lot of people know what a brokered convention is, and well, that's because it hasn't happened for a long time. The last brokered convention for the GOP was in 1948, and the last one for the Democrats was in 1952. So we can see that this brokered convention is not common anymore. It used to be a lot more common in the past. So in these brokered conventions, people are changing their votes. That is essentially what it is for. It will last, well, as long as it takes. In some cases, it has actually taken 103 different rounds of voting for someone to become a clear winner. But what this actually happens is these delegates are going to be switching their votes, and well, the establishment candidates have a much better they have a much better chance of winning. These establishment candidates like Rubio or like Bush, which are the two establishment that I believe will still be in the race at that point, they will have a much higher chance because they are those recognized names. They have the money to throw around in order to get these votes. So if a brokered convention does happen, I feel like there will be probably a Rubio nomination. So, I actually have a question here in the chat. Thank you for actually chatting in this, as it is a live broadcast. So, if half the delegates go to Cruz and half the delegates go to Trump, it's 50-50. That means no one actually has a clear more than 50%. So what would happen is they would re-vote until someone has just one vote more. It has to be one vote over 50%, which is that 1,237 votes, as I talked about earlier. 50-50 would not give anyone the nomination. Thank you for that question, by the way. So, as I was saying, I believe if we did have this brokered convention, that Rubio would probably be nominated. I think Bush would have a much better chance in a brokered convention than he would in just normal primaries if someone actually gets the correct amount of votes. But the Rubio, this establishment candidate, he'll have a great chance, and I believe this will greatly split the GOP. You see, these establishment candidates right now are not looked at as very good candidates. Right now, they're looked at as those candidates that no one wants. Right now, it is obvious that the GOP, and quite honestly, most of America, does not want these career politicians. So we can see if this brokered convention does in fact happen, and, well, they do nominate someone like Rubio or Bush, these establishment candidates that do not have as much support as Trump or Cruz, there is going to be a lot of backlash. This will greatly hurt the GOP. This will greatly hurt basically the conservative movement. If this happens, I guarantee there will be Republicans who do not vote for the Republican nomination. I guarantee there will be Republicans who go third party, even some of the more Ted Cruz voters or the old Rand Paul voters. They will lean probably more towards the libertarian vote, which quite honestly it won't work out because libertarians will not have a chance to actually win this election. And so what's going to happen is we are going to be splitting our vote between this establishment candidate and a third party option, and it will basically guarantee a Democrat win. So this is a scenario that hopefully does not happen, but there are actually high chances of this happening in this current presidential race, as I have said, because we do have I believe we will have 4 candidates at that point. Currently, we have 6 candidates, and that makes it just about destined to have a brokered convention. That is a lot more candidates than we usually have at this point in the presidential race. So we can see that this is actually going to be really, it has high chances. And a lot of media channels, they are actually betting on this happening. I myself am betting on this happening because, well, if you look at all the numbers, there's just really low odds of anyone getting enough delegates. I think some of the delegates who are not bound to a candidate, they will go for, well, whoever they want to. And so that might make it so that it is possible to get just a normal nomination, but it is highly unlikely. Thank you for more questions, by the way. This is great, as it is a live broadcast. And in my opinion, the Republican candidate that has the best chance of beating Hillary or Bernie, that's a really hard question, because I don't know if I would say Trump or Cruz. I don't think Rubio would, because there's a lot of the farther right conservatives who do not like Rubio. I myself am not a big Rubio fan. I feel like probably Trump would be the best one out of these people that we have. I know it's weird to say, but Trump actually is rather moderate. He pulls a lot of those independent votes, as we did see in New Hampshire. Trump has a very good chance of actually pulling the independent vote, and, well, that's what we need in order to beat the Democrats in this election. But that's if we actually don't have a brokered convention. So this brokered convention, it's going to be basically the death of the GOP. If we do have this, there will be a split in the party, and it won't just be for the vote. I believe if we have this brokered convention, there will be a split in the party indefinitely. You will have those establishment GOP backers who back Rubio and Bush. You will have them basically stay in the Republican Party. But then you will have another party that will emerge, a party that is full of more of the anti-establishment candidates, the party that is people who back Rand Paul, the people who back Ted Cruz, the people who don't actually, want these establishment candidates to win. They want a true conservative to be the nominee. A completely third-party, unbiased convention. I don't think that would necessarily... there's not really a solution to this. I think this is basically going to happen. There's very high chances of this happening. This is something that there's really no way to stop it unless enough people drop out of the race. There's always going to be the bias leaning towards establishment candidates, and so that is why this brokered or contested convention, as some would call it, is one of the worst options for the GOP. But that's the thing. There is no way to stop this. There is no way to say, oh, well, we need to just give one more vote and someone will switch, because there are actually a lot of rules in place saying how you can't just switch your vote in the middle of voting because someone else is winning. There's a lot of rules in these GOP nominee conventions so that these people don't just switch willy-nilly in the middle of it. They want to try and get it as accurate as possible, but that also does have the flaws in saying that this broker convention will actually happen because of it. And thank you for the last question here. Who do I think needs to drop out? I think Kasich needs to drop out, and I believe he will. Carson, he's a great guy, but I don't think this is his year to win. He will have to drop out eventually. Then out of those four that I believe will still be in the race, Bush should definitely drop out, because he hasn't had the support that he has had at the beginning of the race he had support, but now all his support has basically just gone away. So I don't think Bush will really have a shot whatsoever unless we do have this brokered convention. And then I think those top three, Trump, Cruz, and Rubio, they have a big backing. If any of those three were to drop out, I think Rubio should be the one to, because he has the least support out of those three at the moment. So that's just my opinion on who I think shouldn't be in the race anymore. That obviously isn't going to happen. I believe Bush and Rubio will stay in the race until the very end. Kasich and Carson, I do believe they will drop out. I think this South Carolina primary will really hit them hard. And then I believe Nevada is next. I believe that will hit them hard again, and they will feel that they don't actually have a chance as they haven't won any primary yet. So they will drop out very soon, I believe so. And that just leaves those four. But again, those four, they have it's really just they all are big enough names so that in these primaries, people's votes are going to be split more evenly among them. It's not going to be a clear winner where someone has 50% of the votes and then someone has like 20. It's going to be pretty close to each other, where it's going to be 28%, 27%, just as it was in the previous primaries. All of these primaries are going to be close, and it might actually come down to the last final primaries, the ones in June. So this presidential race is anything but normal. This presidential race is quite honestly, it's entertaining. It's one of the best shows that is even on TV right now because it is taking so many different turns that wouldn't have been expected. I mean, just the fact that Trump is in the race, he is doing so well, no one would have expected that in a million years. And so we can see that this presidential race is really going to take some turns that hasn't happened in many years. And that is why this broker convention is a high possibility, because of these candidates that you didn't really expect to have a chance, like, well, Rubio or Trump. These candidates that were very small at the beginning. Well, Trump, he wasn't even in the race for most of it, and then he just kind of came in and all of that support came. So these candidates that you didn't really see having a chance, they are the ones that are making it so that we will have this broker convention. They are the ones that are making it so that the GOP actually has a chance of splitting up. So what would that actually mean if the GOP splits up? Well, that would basically be the end of a conservative dominated Congress. That would be the end of a conservative dominated presidency for quite a few years. Because what would have to happen is these two colliding parties fighting for that conservative vote, well, they would be fighting and attacking each other instead of going after the liberals. So the liberals would have this new era, well, sort of like back in Andrew Jackson, when there was the era of good feelings when it was all Democrats. So we can see that there might actually possibly be this new era of good feelings, if you will, where it's all Democrat rule. There's going to be a Democrat-controlled Congress. There will be a Democrat-controlled presidency if this broker convention happens and they do, in fact, nominate one of these establishment candidates. Because I've been talking to many people about this. I've been talking to a lot of people who feel strongly about who they support, and they have outright said if they nominate one of these establishment candidates from a broker convention, I will not vote Republican. I will vote third party. So this is just, it's a huge issue that's actually going on as we speak. It's a huge issue that really came out of nowhere. Not too many people really know what this is, and that's why I'm actually doing this recording, because broker conventions aren't widely known. Actually, just until a couple days ago, I didn't even know what broker conventions were. So these broker conventions, they're not widely known because they haven't happened since 1958. So what this means is a lot of people wouldn't really notice that this is happening, but those ones who are actually watching, and actually the media would probably be covering this quite a bit because it would be entertainment. It would be like a normal TV show. The people who are watching the news, who are watching this presidential race, they have strong feelings about who they support. Now, there will, of course, be people who are going to vote Republican no matter what. They're going to vote for any conservative because they feel that any conservative is better than a liberal. And I feel like that is a good option to go if the nomination happens in normal means. But if this broker convention happens and they choose this establishment candidate through the broker convention, I feel like many people are going to do third party because they need to show the GOP that they can't just be thrown around like this. They need to show the establishment that they aren't just going to be their pawns in a game. So I feel like a lot of people won't be voting Republican in this next election just to show a point. And, well, that's a horrible thing that will happen if this broker convention is a thing. And it's something that is quite honestly inevitable. If if this broker convention happens, it is inevitable that people will vote third party. It is inevitable that this party will have a huge chasm in it. There will be a split. And so I feel like this could be the end of the Republican Party. I feel as if we don't win this presidential election, which we have a lot higher chances of losing if we do this broker convention. I feel if we don't win this presidential election, that the GOP is going to have that split no matter what. So this is a very important election. This election will decide basically the future of the Republican Party. This election will decide the future of America. This is a very important election. We cannot just sit by and not go out and vote. Because quite honestly, in this election, the votes are going to come down to the last primaries. It's going to come down to New York. It's going to come down to California. These states that usually don't have a say in the primaries because they're very far, they're in June. These states that don't usually have a say because the nominee is basically already chosen, they're going to be the deciding factor on whether we have this contested convention or on whether we actually nominate a popular person, on whether we actually nominate the nominee that the people want. So this is a very unusual election cycle, as I have said in the past, because, well, everything is taking turns. It is going to be coming down to the last states. That hasn't happened in forever. It is going to be coming down to whether the delegates actually switch to those establishment candidates, which I believe they will. So this election will be taking these turns that hasn't happened in, well, decades, hasn't happened in many, many, many years. And that is why it is so important. Because if we do not go out and vote for the right candidate, if we don't actually vote someone in, then we won't be in for many years. The Republican Party will fall if we do not go out in masses and vote for the right candidate. Usually in elections, a lot of people just sit around and they don't actually vote. They feel my vote doesn't matter. Those are the people in the states that I talked of earlier, the states like California and New York. These later states, these people usually just sit at home and don't vote because they don't think their vote does anything. Well, the fact of the matter is, their vote will do something in this election. All of our votes actually has an effect in this primary election. So, if we actually get people, and we have enough of these, I would say, debates, if we have more debates, and people actually see who they support the most, there is still a possibility of not having a brokered convention. If people realize that there is one candidate that stands out among the rest of them, then we have a chance of not having this brokered convention. But the fact of the matter is, if no candidate kind of runs away with it, if no candidate breaks out from the pack, then there is going to be a horrible event in the GOP. There's going to be this brokered convention. And that will essentially ruin the Republican Party. That will essentially ruin the conservative movement. So everyone needs to actually go out and vote. Everyone needs to watch these debates. Everyone needs to watch and hear these speeches from these candidates. Because if you're not sure who to vote for yet, you really need to be sure. Because this is a very important election. This election will decide the fate of many things. It's one of the biggest turning points in American history. This will decide on whether the conservatives can actually put someone in office. This will decide if conservatives can actually have someone in Congress in the re-election. Because if no one actually comes out en masse and votes, then there will be sort of this standstill like we have had, where the candidates sort of all have the same amount of delegates, where these delegates aren't really going to a certain candidate. So we will see with this that this brokered convention will essentially ruin the Republican Party. We cannot let this happen. All of us as conservatives needs to choose the one true conservative in the race. well, I won't say the one true, but the most conservative candidate in the race. Because we cannot choose these candidates, these establishment candidates, that won't get the vote from the further conservative vote. I feel that I am not necessarily a Trump backer. I am actually at this moment backing Ted Cruz. But I feel like Trump does have the best chance in being nominated. I feel that Trump has the best chance of winning the general election at this point. So, if you do feel the same way, I'm not saying to go out and vote for whoever you think will win the most. I'm saying to vote for whoever you think represents your ideals the best. But if everyone goes out, or if people don't actually go out to vote and it sort of stays at the standstill that it has been for the last two primaries, and I believe it will be in South Carolina, then we won't have a chance of winning the general election. We won't have a chance in winning the re-election in Congress. This is one of the most influential presidential races in recent history. This will decide the future of our freedoms. Because if a liberal is elected in the general election, they will nominate a liberal Supreme Court justice. If a liberal is elected in the general election, our rights will be taken away one by one. This election is extremely, well, this bases a lot of things on it. Because in this election, our entire Bill of Rights is under fire. If a liberal is elected, our Second Amendment, our First Amendment, our Third Amendment, our Fourth Amendment, these amendments will be taken away or regulated more and more. Because a liberal will nominate a liberal Supreme Court justice. And, well, this is why we need to actually go out and vote. This is why we need to do everything we can to keep this brokered convention from happening. Because if this does happen, the Republican vote will be split between a third-party candidate and the actual Republican nominee. So this brokered convention is a horrible event that might happen, but we need to do whatever we can to prevent it. We need to come out in masses and vote. We need to do whatever we can to realize that this will be the end of the Republican Party if we do not win this general election. So take a moment to think about how important this election is, how important your vote is. Because if you go out and vote for the right candidate, then this brokered convention will not happen. If this brokered convention does not happen, then people will vote for the Republican nominee, and we have a good chance in winning the general election. Think about that for a few moments. Think about how your vote actually matters in this primary election, because this is going to come down to those last final states, those last primaries. This is going to come down to the very end. So this is going to be one of the most crazy presidential races. It already has been, and this is going to continue to take turns after turn until we see this presidential race come to an end. I hope that this race ends with the conservative in the Oval Office. I hope that this presidential race ends with conservatives rising up and saying we do not want liberal rule anymore. So that's all I have to talk about in this episode of The Wise Conservative. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd like to thank all of you who listened live. This was the first time ever on The Wise Conservative, us doing a live show. I'd like to just have you follow our Spreaker account, subscribe to us on YouTube. I don't know what you are listening to this on if you are not live. So continue to actually think about these conservative ideals in this conservative presidential election that is so important. And that's all I have to talk about in this episode. So once again, thank you. And, well, this has been Connor Wise. And thank you for listening to The Wise Conservative Show.